when people compare the Israelis to Nazis, my first reaction generally, other than like complete dismissal, is to think they just don't know any history. The only, Nazi to them means bad. And when they see something they think is bad, they say Nazi. And they don't really understand that Nazi was the systematic humiliation, degradation, and murder of millions and millions and millions of people in camps that were built for that purpose, which is unique in human history. And this is a war. And terrible things happen during a war, no question about it. And nobody, I think, in Israel either would say that terrible things haven't happened and that Israelis have not done terrible things, but it's a war. And it's a war against a pretty implacable enemy that, by the way, could have ended the war by saying, okay, we give up a year ago or a year and a half ago. But when someone like Mearsheimer, who presumably has studied history, is a professor at the University of Chicago, when he makes that analogy, you can't say it's stupidity and ignorance. It can only be malevolence. He wants to compare Israelis to the worst enemy of Jews in the history of many, 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 many enemies of Jews. And that to me is such toxic and evil kind of rhetoric that I just couldn't let it go.
I want to highlight an aspect of Nazism and have you reflect on it, because Nazism is often linked with fascism. And of course, there was fascism in Italy, there was Mussolini, for example, and there were fascist parties in England and Belgium and France and elsewhere. But a key distinguishing element of Nazism was, in fact, its peculiar obsession with the Jews. Mussolini was not obsessed with Jews. In fact, there were Jews who were part of the early fascist movement. Mussolini, to some degree, even helped Jews in World War II. But the point about Hitler was, even when he's losing the war, it's almost all over. You would think that he would grab every soldier he had to send him to the front. But no, the soldiers, I've got to kill some Jews before we get out of here. And so this suggests a level of ethnic obsession with the Jews that is, as you said, singular. It stands out because it's not even rational from the point of view of the Nazi war machine. Do you agree with that?
It's a great point, because you're right. We shouldn't use fascism and Nazism as synonyms in this way, because they diverted trains and trucks and so on to deport helpless citizens of communities all over Poland who had nothing to do with anything to the gas chambers, rather than use those in the war effort. And it defies, obviously it defies logic, but it also defies imagination that the Nazis would be so collectively obsessed with wiping out this people. And the intention was, if they won, to wipe out Jews worldwide. They did not want to stop at Europe. So yes, Nazism is a uniquely evil phenomenon in the history of the world, really the only competitor that it had for the scope of devastation is communism in the 20th century, Soviet and Chinese communism.